Hello and welcome to the Mediator Musings podcast. Today I have Suyheang Kry with us from Cambodia. I'm Joanne Law, Director of Mediation Institute and co-founder of Interact Support. Mediator Musings is a podcast of conversations between mediators and about mediation and dispute resolution. So Heang is a mediator, a conflict transformation practitioner and a feminist who's very passionate about gender equality. Particularly in the conversations I've had with you, you're really concerned about the marginalised groups, particularly women in regional areas in Cambodia, because I'm talking to you from Cambodia.
Yes.
So with the miracle of modern technology, we're able to have a chat across half the world.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
You're very welcome. I've been really looking forward to having another chat with you. So just for those that are listening, Heang is also the Executive Director of the Women Peacemakers, which is a not-for-profit in Cambodia. So you're working on intersectional issues for gender and peace. Well, that's what the organisation has been doing since 2003. What I wanted to know, if you'd like to just explain to people, just to bring everyone to the same page, what intersectional issues of gender and peace
building.
Yeah.
Well, yes, that's very interesting. I think here in Cambodia context, for example, just to put things in context, peace building process, for example, when we're signing the peace agreement after the genocidal and conflicts period. And even though women, for example, was really very active in restoring the entire country's economies and everything, when genocide killing population, particularly here in Cambodia, almost more than 60% of the survivors were women, and they was really the backbones of the society. But when we talk about peace building, when we talk about peace process and restoration of the country, we don't really see women in there. For example, here in Cambodia in 1991, when we signed the peace agreement, we don't really see one single woman in the negotiation table, for example.
Okay.
And so this is just in the leadership level. If we talk about, I think because of these, also in terms of like the lack of women in leaderships, and then look at the violence that's taking place against women, for example, on the ground, is also quite prevalent. For example, here in Cambodia, 1 in 5 women continue to suffer from physical and sexual violence against her, while 1 in 3 suffer from emotional violence. And then how can we talk about peace like when half of the populations is still under living in pressure, especially in living in violence, correct? So I think it's here, the intersectional issues of gender and peace here, we look beyond just peace building or peace building process, that the lack of women participation in leaderships or as an agent of change, but also how can we like ensuring that women can also be able to live free from violence, even at her own home. And so I think if women continue to be trapped in the social norms and all that bring her down, that not being able to participate fully in society, how can we accelerate peace here in the country or in the world? So I think that there's so many intersectionality, and not only between gender here that we talk about, but also ethnicity, for example. Because I think when we talk about women, we are not only talking about women that living in the mainstream majority populations. It's also women that also living in the minority status, and they were not included in the decision-making table. And not only decision here, not only referring to the policy-making level, but even to make the decision in their own life. They, as women and girls from marginalized community or minority community, cannot even decide over her own body when to get married, for example, and got into forced marriage, for example. I think there's so many, like intersectionality of those issues that coming along. And then peace building, of course, is about inclusiveness. And how can we ensure that when half of the world, half of the population in the countries will not be able to access to those equal opportunities to access to all of that?
Excellent. One of the things that I got out of what you were saying is how important it is to recognize, one, the women that are being victimised or put in a marginalised role, but also, I guess, the men or the people that think that's okay, who think it's all right to exert power over their wives or daughters rather than that they have rights to have a say over their own bodies and their own life.
Because I think for me, because I see peace is not only like at the national level,
Yeah.
but peace is very personal. It comes from us, ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think peace is really beginning from you and me. And that the start when we can begin with a peace building. And that's why I think I see that intersectionality together, and how can we like put these two together in the context.
Absolutely. So you're a recipient of our first international scholarship, where we've provided some support to the training to become nationally accredited as a mediator under the Australian system. And part of the reason you wanted to do that, I know, is because you're looking at what does the model for mediation and peace building look like in Cambodia. So seeing what's happening elsewhere, I guess, gives some ideas. What have you found in the process?
Oh, I really see it's such an eye-opening experience, like being able to learn from a mediation institute, particularly the unmasked system, for example. I think because as my work here in Cambodia, we work on trying to really put these two together, like mainstreaming gender in the alternative dispute resolution process, particularly on mediate. Because I think the mediation work here in Cambodia are still, it's not new, but the thing is that the modern mediation, for example, the one that I learned from NMAS, is like something that not being practiced here, because here in Cambodia it's more very traditional way of alternative dispute resolution, and it's been there for centuries. That people use conciliations and arbitration type of mixed method to settle a dispute. And that has been for centuries, been using that one. But the term mediation, interestingly, when we conducted research, we found that people tend to use the word mediation in communication. But in reality, mediation was not really used. The fact that mediator that they call, I think we would just call it alternative dispute resolution practitioners at a community level. They said they use mediation, but actually the practice they've been doing is mixture of and conciliation, where they decide who is right and who is wrong. And then where they give advice on things. And then I think I really, if I to compare, for example, like the modern mediation type of work that I've been practicing in Australia, particularly through NMAS system, it's very, if we are to follow that standard, I really think that it taken a lot of gender sensitivity into that already with that system, like going through the pre-mediation stage where you have screenings, you really talk to people first to ensure that whether this case is appropriate to mediate or not, and if not, then you refer. And also there is a duty of care of the mediator to also report the case if we found there are, like criminal or violence or threat of harm. This was not at all here in Cambodia. Just like those who go to the local authority getting they call mediation, but actually I would just use it alternative dispute resolution, ADR, not to confuse people. When they go and get ADR requests, they seek ADR support from the local authority, there is no such a thing. So pre-screening, there is no, like, in terms of all those rules, ground rules that we created, and the power imbalance was there. And I think that is, I think it really inspired me a lot, like both personally and also in my capacity as the director of Peacemakers, for example. And also this is really inspired me to do more and to pioneer the work in standardized mediations here in Cambodia, particularly in ensuring that there is a gender lens, that we can use gender lens in these processes, particularly to ensure fairness and equality for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so critical. And sometimes we talk about the principles of mediation as if they're just theoretical things that don't really matter, but they really matter, I think.
Oh my God, that matters so much. And I think as a mediator, I think that integrity is so important. And I think that's why I really think things need to be done. I think because I think being exposed to the work of MII, for example, and also NMAS systems, I really think there's a long way to go for us here in Cambodia. But it's also inspiring at the same time that we want to do something. We want to really make things better for everyone, particularly for these type of cases of family. Because I think in Australia, you have special court, the specialized court, for example, your family courts and all of that. Exactly.
Yeah.
Here in Cambodia, we have only one court. And there's no specialized court.
With everything. Okay.
So criminal cases, family cases, everything, civil cases are in one court. Okay. And I think the priority would be go to some high profile cases. And then particularly cases like dealing with family dispute, divorce cases and all that might not be a priority. And especially imagine for women and girls who are living in remote area, access to formal court system is so difficult.
Very difficult. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting, because there are definitely some benefits of having a specialised approach, because even here they've identified the need even now for more training for judges in family violence and coercive control, and particularly so non-physical and control patterns, because sometimes that's harder to see. So if it's a judge who's got to listen to all sorts of different cases and make judgments on them, it's very difficult for them to have that refined knowledge and understanding.
Exactly. I think this is so important. And that's why I think currently I've been using like what I have learned from the NMAS course, really applying it into work I'm doing here as well. And particularly in supporting the Ministry of Women Affairs in reviewing the National Mediation Guideline. That guideline is focusing on the limited use of mediation as a response to violence against women that is so prevalent here in Cambodia. And really to look at when mediation is appropriate and legal to mediate, and then if it is not, how can we refer?
What are the options if not?
Exactly.
And we've been having some email conversations about shuttle mediation as well. What are the ways that the issues might be resolved without putting someone in a position where they're so frightened that they agree to things that they shouldn't?
Exactly. Yeah. And then I think this has been very helpful. I think the learning and knowledge that I got from the course has been very, very eye-opening, like I said. And I think that is a very enriching, the actual experience of that. And I'm really looking forward to applying more of those concepts in reality, particularly in different contexts like Cambodia, for example. We might have to adapt something in order to really make it contextualize in the local context.
And it should always be. And you've got the family group conference course coming up soon. So that's going to be another model of alternative dispute resolution, which you may find has some really nice context as well for there. So it's come out of, I don't know how much you've got into that course, but it's come out of New Zealand with Maori families. And so looking at, once again, not having a judge or an arbitrator putting your case to them and making a decision, but actually bringing the family together to work on the issues to try and particularly keep kids safe.
Wow, I really find that course, I haven't really gone into that course yet, but I think by looking at the descriptions and some of the material, I feel like it's really another new model that I think we can consider in terms of, particularly in context like Cambodia. We also, at the end of the day, how can we really create a harmony home, but it doesn't mean that harmony at the expense of violence against someone else. So I think finding
peace through fear is not really peace.
Exactly. One of our research, I think, have shared with you on preserving harmony or preventing justice. That's the title of our research. Because how come? And I think because maybe also the legal context as well. Here in Cambodia, in the mediation, the domestic violence law here in Cambodia allow for mediation or conciliation, quote, to take place when there is a cases on minor or minor misdemeanor or petty crime cases. But interestingly, in our criminal code, the misdemeanor doesn't distinguish between minor or severe misdemeanor. There is only misdemeanor cases. I think it also because the criminal code were adopted after the domestic violence law were adopted. And that is the issue because of also the law is also not consistent.
Yeah.
And so the practitioners also find it very challenging which type of cases can be mediated or which type cannot be mediated, and how can we identify which one is minor misdemeanor or which one is severe misdemeanor when the criminal code doesn't even define the two.
Yeah, look, it's definitely a problem, and we've got the same problem here at the moment in our regulations for family dispute resolution practitioners. You can't give legal advice unless you're a lawyer, and at the moment I'm trying to get someone to tell me what's the definition of legal advice. And surprisingly, that is a really hard thing to get a definition.
Exactly.
So I haven't got it yet. So I've contacted the regulatory body for legal practitioners to see if they have a definition. And yeah, it's a universal problem where lawmakers make laws and they don't actually necessarily think through, is everyone going to understand what we mean by this word? And
Right.
it really comes back to what we do in mediation, because often the exploration phase is all
Right.
about you're
Unpacking.
using words,
Yeah.
you think you know what that word means, but do you know what they mean by that word or that, what they're saying? It can be really quite different what they actually mean. And I think that's one of the interesting things that we've been talking about, because look, everyone who works in dispute resolution, we acknowledge that conflict or disputes are a part of life, but the way they're resolved is, I guess, we're all working towards one where people are able to make decisions. And in the family law context, these are decisions about their children and how they're going to be cared for when they're not together, and also about their things, what they have. It sounds like in Cambodia the model is very much someone else makes this decision. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, I think for what happening on the ground, like at a communal level, community village level, I think that's what happening is that even at school level too, like when schools children having conflict with each other, then the principal of the school will ask them to go to the office and then making decision, you're right, you're wrong. And then you need to do this and you need to do that. It's more like arbitrate type of thing.
Yeah.
And very interestingly, even in the local context nowadays, it's the same. Like when women or anyone who have any dispute, they want to go and settle it at the local level, then you go to the local office, commune office, and then there they would just say, "Ah, you are right. Oh, you are wrong." And then you should do this and you should do that. You should say sorry and get into agreement. You will stop. I will stop doing this. I will stop doing that. I think there is no process much in terms of a system or process to really doing so.
Yeah.
And it's not only in practice, it also reflects in the law as well. It's interestingly, even in our law, the domestic violence law, for example, it misuse, like the term arbitrations and mediations and all that as well. In our DV law, for example, like they keep saying in terms of like the mediator can then become an arbitrator to solve the problem in order to preserve the harmony within the household. That literally quote, that's what being said. But I think because I think it probably they don't mean by the technical arbitrator.
No.
They kind of mean, and I think maybe the law wanna mean someone who is and being arbitrator is a neutral, and it's the term that's been used for centuries. And I think it's also very interesting to look at that.
And look, that is the tradition in most societies, that you go to someone who's wise, and if you can't make the decisions, you take it to them. And they took my cow. No, that was that was my cow. And the person makes a decision. Or my husband has been a bad husband, and he.
So I really think that those terms would be like it mean it by in day-to-day language, but it doesn't really mean in the technical term that we all know in the ADR world.
Absolutely,
I guess.
which
I
causes
kind of assume it that way.
confusion. And that's part of the work that you're doing to, let's make sure everyone understands what we mean when we say what are the rights. So in arbitration, people are signing a contract, an agreement that they will generally abide by what's been decided. Is that what they're doing when they go to the person to have their dispute resolved? Are they agreeing that they're going to comply with what they're told, or it's less formal than that?
It's very at a communal level. It's
Yeah.
really less formal. And if
Yeah.
two parties go to have their dispute settled at the local level, then like after they go through a process of negotiations, and then someone would probably give advice and all of that, and then later on they into agreement, is the agreement between the two. Because I think that even the local authority does not sign anything on that agreement at all.
Yeah.
So it's more like between these two. So it's no signing or anything in terms of abide by what you just
people
mentioned.
really
earlier.
knowing what the terms are that they're doing.
Right.
We just go there because they feel, oh, you need to go and talk to them.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, pretty much.
And I think it looked like also from our research studies, I think those agreements, particularly in this case of family dispute and sometimes involving in violent cases, is that they sometimes they don't really implementing that agreement after they go into conciliation process.
Yeah.
When they're coming back. And I think in worst case scenario, and that is the spark my passions in this journey, because 4 years ago in 2018, there is one high profile case happened in one of the province here in Cambodia, that one couple who the women domestic violence, including physical and sexual violence against her. And then she no longer want to endure anymore, and she want to get divorced. And she go to the communal go to the communal office to get to ask for divorce, but she could not get it because by Cambodian law, any divorce have to go through the court, and no one would ever have any authority beside the judge and the court who can deliver the order. And then she had to came back, and when she came back, and that night the husband stabbed her to death.
Oh, okay.
At that night. And I think that is the challenge. And when as the duty of care was not there, I think if you know that someone experiencing violence, how can you refer that particular moment to ensure that she is not returning home and stay with someone who is abusive anymore?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I really think that.
So that safety planning just wasn't there. Like we had a case with one of our members recently. So it was, they did the pre-screening. There'd never been any physical violence in the relationship. So they got to the mediation, barely got in, and then the husband just, maybe he realised that the marriage was actually over, but he got really angry, shouting, saying he was going to, kill her, put his hand through the wall, punched the wall, and then stormed out. So our member, she obviously locked the door and didn't let him back in when he came back in. But then she did a safety plan with the lady and helped her to get somewhere safe for the night. And the husband had gone back to the house and tried to burn it down. So if she said, oh, that was bad, okay, we better not do any more mediation, bye, and sent the lady home, she could have been a statistic. So it is really important. We deal with people, often someone who's been in a controlling relationship, when they feel that the control's going to end, they do take these awful decisions.
But I think that's why I really think that ADO, because especially in the context where formal court system is so far reach, it's really difficult to reach.
Right.
But I think it's important to probably when we have alternative dispute resolutions there, to ensure that how can these be done in a way that provide like empowerment to those who seek support.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, when it is not appropriate, that would be going through the formal system. And I think it's so important, and it can really help a lot of more people to access to justice.
Absolutely, yeah, because if you do that triage early and you help the people who can work things through with some support themselves, then they're not clogging up the court, which means for the people that really it's not appropriate, they can't do it themselves because of the behaviour of one of the people, or both. Sometimes they both lose touch with reality, and so the court system has, even an imperfect system has some structure and processes that might give a bit more protection.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So the studies that you've done are really interesting, and we don't have time to go into them in a lot of detail, but I'd love to put the links to them so people listening would be able to access them fully. But do you want to maybe just explain, just really brief, what
Sure.
the outcomes were from?
Yes, so this study was conducted in 2020, 2019, 2019 and 2020. So the whole idea is that we really want to know what is actually happening in terms of ADR in the local community, particularly in cases of domestic violence and intimate partner violence. And then what we found was that because we do it from both the service user and the service provider at a community level. And we found that because the practice of mediation was not actually being practiced, and that more resembled conciliation and arbitrations. And then about 80% of those who we interviewed, the women survivor, the women that we interviewed, the respondent, almost 80% of them are having negative experience with ADR process. And that is because I'm talking here in the context of intimate partner violence.
Yeah.
And because it's a negative, because they feel like there's a failure or refusal to refer to for referral, because when violence taking place, service providers still want them to do ADR, for example. And then there is also community. There's also power dynamics within the process. The parties and the mediator, the ADR practitioner themselves at the community level. And then there's also when it already in failure, still continue to conduct ADR, for example. And then and then I think one of the key things that we also found is that in the service provider's point of view, there is also a serious lack of knowledge and training as well. They never going through any training about mediation, about ADR. It's all very like,
just what they think.
what they think that just like from generation to generation, that's how things does with settle dispute, for example. And then among those who we talk to, service providers, in our research we talked to 167 people. And then in there, only less than 25% of female who are working as the ADR practitioners on the ground. And importantly, those 25% still not playing, the majority do not play a key role in the process, mostly like administrative things. So we don't really have many.
That's what I was going to ask you about. So that you mentioned that there was a real gender inequality when, I suppose, the current status of Cambodia after the horrible genocide, there was a real gender imbalance in leadership, and it seems like that's still not totally.
I think it's not yet. I think here, even in the leadership positions and the national level, less than 20% of the policymakers are still, less than 20% are women. And even at the subnational level, who are in leadership, less than 20% are women who are serving in the leadership positions. And then if we talk about here, mediator, at least not all, because we only survey in 3 provinces here in Cambodia. So we are talking in this context, not generalizing of all. And then we found that 25% of them are female, but only small majority, but like only few of them really leading the process. The rest were just doing administrative role and not really leading in the mediation, the ADR process. So I think this lack of like the participation and leadership of women is also because as here in Cambodia, almost 1/3 of the local authority survey in 2010 this is a national data, is that they still have like giving gender stereotype of advice because they still believe that there is one reason to justify violence. And I think with that particular thinking and perceptions, and then when ADR is about giving advice to people, and then those gender stereotyping advice might be given to people.
So the woman might say, he's been abusing me, he's done these things, and they'd say, what did you do to cause that?
Just like victim blaming, because you do this. And also this is one quote we got, it like, there's one hand cannot make a clap. It doesn't mean that you hit the man who hit the wife is right, oh,
Yeah.
it's wrong, or the women, all these, because you did something to cause something.
Yeah, I think one hand can very easily slap. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so is there much being done with co-mediation? So having two mediators?
I think yes, they are called because mediation. I mean, like the one
Oh,
that
the
the
ADR
modern one is
process?
not being
Yeah.
really practiced,
Yeah.
and so there are, because during the conciliation or ADR process at that time, it's like there were one or two, sometimes three people, authorities there,
Yeah.
but more like I said earlier, more like in arbitrations and conciliations approach.
Yeah.
So which is not really in a way they empower the parties, both parties, to voice their own, to make their own decisions and say,
Yeah.
and not being influenced by the authority, because authority, they are in a powerful position. So I think
Yeah.
those power imbalance also in the
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
And look, it occurs to me, and I haven't been to Cambodia, but it occurs to me that there must be some significant intergenerational trauma in your country.
Yes, yes. I think, yeah, PTSDs and all that, but
Yeah.
also because here in Cambodia, even the psychological support has been so little as well. I
Mm.
think after the Khmer Rouge genocide in 1979, very few psychologists survived the Khmer Rouge
Mm.
regime. And even right now, we have very few psychologists available in the country. And then we have new generation who go into to do
Yeah.
psychology courses and
Mm.
training. And then I think, but still there is gaps in
Yeah.
terms of psychological support. And also here the country is seeing people who like psychological issue as being crazy. There is
Mm.
still stigma
Yeah.
around psychological mental health
Yeah,
support. So
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, where if your leg's broken, that will treat that. But if you're having
right.
a problem in your brain, no, that's your fault. Which is
So I think this is really like very like key things, but there's
mm,
many other things that you can learn more
yeah,
from the research. And I think one of the key recommendations here was
mm,
that, and I think based on this context that we're living in right now, the
yeah,
with the limited resources, with
yeah,
all these contexts of legal systems and everything here in the
mm,
country, I think ADR still can be very beneficial,
yeah,
but at the same time, how can these be limited in a way that it's not like all cases can be going
yeah,
through ADR. I
yeah,
think there need to
yeah.
be defined
They need, yeah,
which
so
one
risk screening and
exactly.
yeah, there's simple tools that people can use, risk matrices and things like that. So there's it's and I believe that's the work you're working on at the moment to try and support
Yes.
strengthening the model. So there's a bit more basis.
Right. Yes, yes. So I think this is the result. I think one of the biggest result out of this research would be is that currently finally we managed to in producing that mediation guideline. We
Mm,
mean a guideline that going not to really go there and ensuring that when can mediation be possible and
yeah,
when can it not be, and then if it can, how, if it
yeah,
not, how,
perfect.
like all of
Yeah,
that to really
yeah,
strengthening that one. And
yeah,
I think all these, I think the work we do here, and also plus the knowledge I get from MII, from Mediation Institute and Mass, I think that is so enriching for me. And we have incorporated some of the key things in there as well in the guideline, and also in the training manual that we are currently supporting the Ministry of Women Affairs to develop.
yeah,
And particularly because we don't really have a system right now. And so what we can do is that to ensure that the local authority could have those being capacitated in a
mm,
way that they know when to do mediation they should not be doing and when to refer.
yeah,
And then if they do, then ensuring that how they can do that in a way that is not re-victimize all the parties whenever, because when they are engaging in a dispute, there's always things happening, and so
yeah,
they really need to have some skill around that. And I think this has been very helpful, and now I think the mission is really to ensure how can these be done in practice, how can we ensure the implementations is in line with the guideline,
mm,
and yeah, to ensure that this is being practice, while at the same time working to standardize the mediations here in Cambodia, not only in this case, but also in generally as well. I think that has been the dream to
Yeah.
really
Ab-
moving
abs-
forward on this.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. So have you given any thought to safety planning as part of that model? And
Yes, we do, especially with the referral, because here we also have a referral guideline
yeah,
by the Ministry of Women Affairs, and they have referral guidelines. And then in terms of safety plan, I think that the challenge would be the lack of resources at the
yeah,
local level. Like with all these guidelines and everything's safety plan and all that, but here in Cambodia, unfortunately, we don't even have one single state fund safe shelter,
mm,
for example.
yeah,
So I think it will refer to non-NGO, for example,
yeah,
non-government organizations and other private services, for example, and the local police that was around there. So I think we were trying to really, I think one of the safety plan we still have there, but I think the challenge is about the resources that is
yeah.
available on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to think of safety plans in Australian context like a bushfire plan. We have a lot of people that live in forest that burns in the summer.
Mm,
And part of the safety plan is when it's a bushfire day, when it's a hot, should you get out early? And it's not necessarily to a refuge, it might be family or friends or other things. So
mm,
having someone who
right.
can talk through the strategies, because when someone's living in a violent relationship, there's a bit of a myth that they know how to keep themselves safe, but they don't
They
necessarily.
don't.
We wouldn't have so
Exactly.
many people being murdered if that was the case. And so it's ideal if the government or the NGOs have a safety net there, but if not, how do we help people to be more prepared to talk to the neighbours? So if the
Yeah,
neighbours
yeah.
hear screaming, they're, oh, I've just come to borrow something, interrupt. All of those
Yeah.
strategies. So there might be something with the possibility of what's there. So we can have another conversation about some of that. I've got some resources I could share there as well.
Yeah, yeah. That's great.
Because and it might be the women who are supporting rather than the ADA person who has these conversations, who may have greater levels of empathy and
Yeah, actually, I think what we found in our studies, very interestingly, that all those ADR practitioners, local authorities, they're really helpful. They even
yeah.
provide their own home for the women to seek
Okay.
refuge in.
So they want
I
to help.
think,
Yeah.
yeah, they
So
really want to help. They
it's
have a
just that
very
they
good
lack the
will.
training or the
Exactly. They lack training, lack guideline that really show them how to do that. They
yeah.
lack resources or how to
Yeah.
do that. Like all that. I think it's really to
Absolutely.
ensure that. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and so it sounds fabulous what you're doing to work to support them and put in, yeah, because it's very hard. They're difficult things when people are in conflict, and it's very hard for someone with very little training to just make it up based on their own personal experience. And we know everywhere in the world we're still evolving into really a balanced society where, I suppose the contributions of women and the way we do things is respected as much as the contributions of men and the way they do things, because they're not always identical.
Yep. Yep.
But yeah, different doesn't mean worse or better. It's just different and complementary if it's allowed to be. And we're two women who are leaders of our organisations and changing the world. And there's a lot of women and people of all different types and kinds and backgrounds we're all working towards a better world.
Yes.
And
Yes. Yes.
and thanks to this sort of technology, we can chat anywhere and gather support and resources from anywhere. In the family group conferencing course, I think we're going to have some people from England on your course as well, which will be really interesting because that's another context too.
Sound exciting. I'm very much looking forward to that course. Yes, the
Yeah.
family conferencing group.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just mindful of time because we could stay talking for hours. But are there any final thoughts or anything you'd like to share with people before we close?
Well, I just want to thank you. I really could not imagine that I have these opportunities and being able to be being able to learn and expose to new learning, especially a standardized system of mediation, is really opening my eye to really see things broader. And I think the acquired knowledge and skills that I've now been applying and using, I really hope that this can also help to also make like contributing my best to make things better here in Cambodia. And I really thank you for these opportunities. And I'm really looking forward to learning more, and particularly anyone who may be interested in our context and also maybe want to share your context, particularly in this type of intimate partner or family dispute type of cases, then it would be really great to be in touch. And I would like to learn more how your countries or your contexts are dealing with these type of things. And really having that exchange is really eye-opening. So like for me, having an opportunity to learn and compare and contrast between Cambodia and Australia, and all that is really amazing. And I think it's helped me to think outside the box and to really see things in a creative way.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. And I think you're right. It's really helpful to have a look at different contexts, and because, it's too easy to think the limits of what's happening in your context are the limits, and they're not really. But so look, it's been fabulous as always to chat. And as I said, with our podcast, we'll pop that up and send links for people, and it'll be on iTunes and all of the podcast places. But on the Mediation Institute website, we'll put a form. So if anyone listening is interested in having a conversation with Heang about your context, or particularly perhaps some of our Indigenous mediators who are also looking at traditional models of dispute resolution, and we've had a huge damage and dislocation caused by colonisation in Australia, but there's a real regrowth and really some amazing work being done in alternative dispute resolution in our Indigenous communities. So hopefully some of you that are listening will get in contact with Heang, because there could be some really good ways to build on those traditions, because there's some wonderful work that's being done still with those traditional. So you heard the invitation. She's very open to being contacted, aren't you? Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope you've really enjoyed hearing this podcast with Heang and finding out a little bit more about the work that they're doing in Cambodia. If you would like to contact her to open a conversation, you can find a contact form on this podcast on the Mediation Institute website. Go to www.mediationinstitute.edu.au, and on the main menu you'll find a tab for events and blog. Under that you'll find the Mediator Musings listings. You can also go directly to Heang's profile on the Mediation Institute website. So that's mediationinstitute.edu.au /team-member /Suyheang Kry. So that's SUYHEANG-KRY. You can probably just search Suyheang's email or name on our website and get her profile. From there you'll have a form where you can send a message and it will email directly to her and open up a conversation.